The gunshot echoed across the dusty main street of Elko, Nevada, drawing everyone's attention away from Nora Ellis as she hastily stuffed her belongings into her trunk. She paused, heart racing, before resuming her packing with even greater urgency. The year was 1875, and after 5 years of trying to build a life in this unforgiving territory, she had finally admitted defeat. The train would depart in 3 hours, taking her back east where civilization, comfort, and perhaps a semblance of happiness awaited. Miss Ellis. A deep voice called from across the street. Nora didn't need to look up to know who it was. Ethan Walker, the town's most respected cowboy and ranch foreman. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust as he approached, hat in hand. "Mr. Walker," she acknowledged coolly, continuing to arrange her items in the trunk. The morning sun cast long shadows across the weathered porch of the small schoolhouse where she had taught for the past 3 years. "I heard tell you're leaving on today's eastbound train," he said, his voice carrying that distinctive Western drawl that she had once found so foreign and now found so familiar. "News travels fast in Elko," she replied, still not meeting his gaze. "Yes, I've decided to return to Boston. My father's health is declining and there's nothing for me here anymore." That wasn't entirely true. There was something, or rather, someone, but circumstances and pride had kept them apart for too long now. "Nothing at all?" Ethan questioned, his voice softer than usual. He stepped closer, his tall frame blocking the sun. Finally, Nora looked up at him. At 32, Ethan Walker was everything a frontier man should be: strong, capable, respected. His sun-weathered face and the small scar above his right eyebrow told stories of years spent in the harsh Nevada landscape. But it was his eyes that always caught her attention, a clear blue that reminded her of the vast western sky. "My position at the school has been filled. The new teacher arrives next week. Mr. Richardson has already purchased my house," she said matter-of-factly, though her voice quavered slightly. "I've made my arrangements, Mr. Walker. It's time I admit that the West isn't for everyone." Ethan placed his hat back on his head, adjusting it slightly. "I understand you've got your reasons, Miss Ellis, but I was hoping we might have a proper goodbye before you leave." "We're saying goodbye right now, aren't we?" Nora challenged, closing her trunk with more force than necessary. "That's not what I meant," he replied. "I'd like to escort you to dinner tonight, one last meal before you go, for old time's sake." Nora hesitated. She and Ethan had a complicated history, one of initial friendship followed by misunderstandings and hurt feelings. Their paths had crossed frequently in a town as small as Elko, but they had maintained a careful distance for the past year. "I don't think that would be appropriate, Mr. Walker." "Ethan," he corrected. "After everything, I think you can call me Ethan, Nora." The sound of her name on his lips made her heart skip a beat. She busied herself with the latch of her trunk. "Please," he continued. "I'm not asking for much, just dinner at the Grand Central Hotel, 7 o'clock. Before she could refuse again, the schoolhouse door opened, and young Martha Jenkins emerged with tearful eyes. "Miss Ellis, I finished cleaning the blackboards," the 12-year-old announced, then noticed Ethan. "Morning, Mr. Walker." "Morning, Miss Jenkins," Ethan replied with a gentle tip of his hat. Martha looked between them. "Miss Ellis, are you really leaving today? Ma says we might never see you again." Nora's expression softened as she placed a hand on Martha's shoulder. "I've taught you for 3 years now, Martha. You've become an excellent student. Mrs. Peterson will continue your education wonderfully." "But she won't be you," Martha protested, tears welling in her eyes. Nora felt her resolve weakening. This was exactly why goodbyes were so difficult. Sometimes change is necessary, even when it's painful. Martha wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "Will you at least write to us?" "Of course I will," Nora promised, though she knew such correspondence rarely lasted. Ethan watched the interaction quietly before speaking again. 7 o'clock, Miss Ellis. I'll be waiting whether you come or not." With that, he touched the brim of his hat and walked away, leaving Nora staring after him with a mixture of frustration and something else she refused to name. The remainder of the morning passed in a blur of goodbyes and well wishes. Former students and their parents stopped by, along with fellow teachers and townspeople she had come to know. By midday, Nora had retreated to her nearly empty house, surrounded by the few possessions she hadn't sold or given away. At 28, Nora Ellis had expected more from life than what she had found. Born to a respectable Boston family, she had come west following her idealistic dreams of adventure and making a difference. The reality had been harsher than expected: brutal weather, isolation, the ever-present threat of illness, and the rigid social expectations that somehow seemed even more constricting in a place with fewer people. She sank into her chair by the window, gazing out at the distant mountains. Despite everything, there was a wild beauty to Nevada that she would miss. The vast open spaces, the brilliant starry nights, the sense of possibility that hung in the air. A knock at her door roused her from her thoughts. Opening it, she found Mrs. Henderson, the mayor's wife, holding a basket. "I thought you might need something to eat before your journey," the older woman said kindly. "Train food isn't fit for dogs, let alone a lady." "That's very thoughtful, thank you," Nora replied, accepting the basket. Mrs. Henderson lingered in the doorway. "We'll miss you, dear. You've done wonders for this town's children. I've tried my best." "And what about that handsome Ethan Walker?" Mrs. Henderson asked with the directness of someone who had earned the right to be nosy. "Half the town expected you two to end up together after that business with the school fundraiser 2 years ago." Nora's cheeks flushed. "Mr. Walker and I are merely acquaintances." Mrs. Henderson's knowing look made it clear she didn't believe that for a second. "Well, acquaintance or not, that man looks at you like you hang the moon, dear. Just something to consider before you board that train." After Mrs. Henderson left, Nora found herself staring at the clock. 5 hours until her train departed. 6 hours until she would be gone from Elko forever. And 2 hours until Ethan would be waiting for her at the Grand Central Hotel. She told herself she wouldn't go. There was no point reopening old wounds. Yet as the afternoon waned, she found herself washing her face, changing into her second-best dress she had packed her finest for the journey, and pinning her dark hair up in a style more elaborate than her usual practical arrangement. At 6:45, Nora stood outside the Grand Central Hotel, the most impressive building in Elko. Its 2 stories of painted clapboard and large windows represented the town's ambitions more than its current reality. She hesitated, one hand on the door, the other clutching her small purse. "You came," a voice said behind her. Turning, she found Ethan standing there, looking more polished than usual. He had traded his work clothes for a clean, dark suit, and his usually untamed brown hair was neatly combed. He'd even trimmed his beard. "I haven't decided yet," she replied, though clearly she had. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Well, while you're deciding, perhaps you'd allow me to buy you dinner." Inside, the hotel's dining room was the closest thing Elko had to elegance. Crisp white tablecloths covered the tables, and actual glass lanterns provided warm light. A small vase with wildflowers sat at each table, a touch Nora had always appreciated. The maitre d' led them to a table in the corner, away from the few other diners. Ethan pulled out Nora's chair for her before taking his own seat. "You look beautiful tonight," he said after they were settled. "Not that you don't always, but—" "Thank you," she interrupted, saving him from his awkward compliment. "You look quite presentable yourself." "High praise indeed," he chuckled. They ordered their meals, the hotel's famous steak for him, chicken for her, and fell into an uncomfortable silence until their drinks arrived. "So," Ethan began, "Boston, that's a mighty long way from here." "Yes, almost as far as one can get and still be in the country," Nora agreed. "My father's house is in Beacon Hill. It's quite different from Elko." "I reckon it is. No dust storms or rattlesnakes, I imagine. No, just endless social engagements and expectations," she said with a small smile. "Is that what you want?" he asked directly. "To return to that life?" Nora took a sip of her water. What I want doesn't always align with what's necessary, Mr. Walker. We're back to Mr. Walker now, she sighed. Ethan, then, what is it you hope to accomplish with this dinner? We've hardly spoken in months except in passing. Why the sudden interest in my departure? He looked at her steadily. It's not sudden, Nora. Nothing about how I feel about you is sudden. Her heart stuttered, but she maintained her composure. And how exactly do you feel? Before he could answer, their food arrived, providing a momentary reprieve from the tension. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Ethan spoke again. Do you remember the first time we met? He asked. Of course she did. It had been during her first week in Elko, when she'd gotten lost trying to find the schoolhouse. Ethan had found her wandering near the livery stable, looking completely out of place in her Eastern clothes. You thought I was utterly hopeless, she recalled. I thought you were the most determined woman I'd ever met, he corrected. Most Eastern ladies would have been in tears, but you were just frustrated and ready to fight the whole town to find your way. I was scared, she admitted. Everything was so foreign. The openness of the land, the directness of the people. But you adapted, you thrived. The children adore you, the parents respect you. You've made a difference here, Nora. She looked down at her plate. Perhaps, but it wasn't enough, was it? What would be enough? Nora didn't answer immediately. The truth was complicated. She had come west seeking purpose and independence, but she had also longed for connection, the kind that seemed increasingly unlikely as she established herself as the proper, unmarried schoolteacher. My father is ill, she said instead. He needs someone to care for him. You have siblings in Boston, don't you? Yes, but they have their own families, their own lives. And you don't have a life here, I mean. The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. I had hoped to, she finally said. But some things aren't meant to be. Ethan put down his fork. What happened between us, Nora? We were friends once, good friends. Then suddenly you could barely look at me. Nora felt her defenses rising. You know very well what happened, Ethan, the Founders' Day celebration. You escorted Margaret Reynolds instead of me after weeks of giving me the impression that you would ask me. Is that what this has been about all this time? Ethan looked genuinely surprised. Nora, Margaret's brother, was ill. She was distraught. I offered to escort her as a friend, nothing more. You didn't think to explain that to me. I tried. You wouldn't speak to me for weeks afterward. And when I finally caught you alone at the general store, you told me in no uncertain terms that my personal affairs were none of your concern. Nora remembered that day clearly. She had been hurt and embarrassed, especially after enduring weeks of knowing glances from the town gossips who had also expected Ethan to escort her. I was protecting myself, she admitted. This town runs on gossip, and I couldn't bear being the subject of pitying whispers. So instead, we both spent a year avoiding each other, Ethan said, shaking his head. Seems a waste now, doesn't it? Perhaps, Nora conceded. But what difference does it make now? I'm leaving tonight. Ethan reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. What if you didn't? Didn't what? Leave, tonight or at all? Nora stared at him. My ticket is purchased, my position is filled, my house is sold. What would you have me do? Stay, he said simply. Stay in Elko, with me. The directness of his statement left her momentarily speechless. Before she could respond, a commotion near the hotel entrance caught their attention. The door burst open and Sheriff Daniel Moore rushed in, his face grim. Walker, he called, spotting Ethan immediately. We need you. There's trouble at the Jenkins farm. Fire in the north pasture and spreading fast. Ethan stood immediately, professional instinct taking over. How bad? Bad enough, the sheriff replied. Wind's picking up. We're gathering every able-bodied man. I'll be right there, Ethan said, then turned to Nora. I'm sorry I have to go, she nodded, understanding the urgency. Fires were one of the most feared disasters in the dry Nevada landscape. Of course, go, Ethan hesitated for just a moment. Your train leaves at 9. Yes. This isn't goodbye, Nora, he said firmly. Not yet. With that, he followed the sheriff out, leaving Nora alone at the table with their half-eaten meal and a storm of emotions she couldn't begin to sort through. She paid for their dinner, ignoring the sympathetic looks from the waitstaff, and stepped out into the evening air. The town was already buzzing with activity as men gathered equipment and organized themselves to fight the fire. In the distance, she could see an ominous orange glow against the darkening sky. Returning to her empty house, Nora checked her pocket watch. Just over an hour until the train departed. She should be heading to the station soon, but something kept her rooted in place. Ethan's words echoed in her mind, "Stay in Elko with me." What did that even mean? Was it a declaration of love, a proposal, or simply a friend asking her not to leave? And why now, when everything was arranged for her departure, a sudden knock at her door startled her? Opening it, she found young Martha Jenkins, her face streaked with tears and soot. "Miss Ellis, please, we need help," the girl cried. "The fire's spreading to our farm. Ma sent me to town for help while Pa and the boys try to save what they can." Without hesitation, Nora grabbed her shawl. "Where's your mother now?" "At the farm, trying to get the little ones out," Martha sobbed. "There's so much smoke, Miss Ellis." "I'll come with you," Nora decided. "We'll gather more help on the way." As they hurried through town, Nora stopped at several houses, alerting people to the Jenkins family's plight. By the time they reached the outskirts of town, a small group of women had joined them, carrying blankets and water. The Jenkins farm was located 3 miles north of Elko. As they approached, the devastation became apparent. The fire had jumped from the northern pasture to the fields surrounding the farmhouse. Men were frantically forming bucket lines from the well to the flames, while others beat at the fire with wet blankets. Nora spotted Mrs. Jenkins clutching her 2 youngest children, watching in horror as the flames crept closer to their home. "Sarah," Nora called, rushing to the woman's side, "we've come to help." "Oh, Nora," Mrs. Jenkins embraced her with her free arm. "Thank the Lord." "The men are trying, but the wind keeps changing direction." Nora took charge of the youngest child, a boy of 3, while organizing the women into teams, some to wet blankets, others to help move valuable possessions from the house to safety, and a few to prepare food and water for the firefighters. Hours passed in a blur of smoke, heat, and desperate activity. Nora lost track of time as she moved between tasks, her fine dress now ruined with soot and sweat. The fight against the fire was relentless, with moments of hope followed by setbacks as the wind shifted. At some point during the night, she glimpsed Ethan directing men at the southern edge of the property, his face blackened with ash, his voice hoarse from shouting instructions. Their eyes met briefly across the chaos, and something unspoken passed between them before they both returned to their tasks. It was nearly dawn when the fire was finally contained. The Jenkins barn was lost, along with their northern fields, but the house had been saved. Exhausted fighters collapsed wherever they could find space, accepting water and food from the equally tired women. Nora sat on the porch steps, the youngest Jenkins boy asleep in her lap, when Ethan approached. He looked utterly spent, his clothes singed and his face still streaked with soot despite attempts to clean it. "You're still here," he said, his voice rough from smoke. "Martha came for help," she explained. "I couldn't refuse." "No, you couldn't," he agreed, sitting heavily beside her. "That's who you are, Nora. That's who you've always been." She looked at the sleeping child in her arms. "I missed the train." "I know," he paused. "Do you regret it?" Nora considered the question honestly. "No," she finally said. "These people needed help." "Elko needs you," Ethan said quietly. "Not just in emergencies. Every day." Before she could respond, Mr. Jenkins approached, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in one night. "Miss Ellis, Mrs. Henderson tells me you saved our family Bible and the children's photographs," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't thank you enough." "Anyone would have done the same," Nora demurred. "No, they wouldn't," he insisted. "You were supposed to be on a train east, yet here you are, holding my son after fighting all night to save our home." As Mr. Jenkins walked away, Nora felt the weight of her decision. She had missed her train, her carefully planned escape from the life that had disappointed her. "What happens now?" she asked, more to herself than to Ethan. That depends on you, he replied. The eastbound train comes through again in 3 days. Nora looked around at the community that had come together in crisis, neighbors helping neighbors without hesitation. She had been part of that, had contributed in a meaningful way. My father is still ill, she said. And my house is still sold. My position at the school is still filled. All true, Ethan acknowledged, but if you're looking for reasons to stay, I can offer one. Just one, she asked, a hint of her usual spirit returning despite her exhaustion. It's a good one, he promised. But this isn't the time or place. You need rest, as do I. Mrs. Henderson approached them, her usually immaculate appearance now disheveled. Nora, dear, you'll stay with us for now. We have plenty of room and you can't possibly travel in your condition. Nora looked down at her ruined dress and laughed softly. I suppose not. And you, Ethan Walker, need to have that burn on your arm looked at, Mrs. Henderson continued, ever the commanding presence. Dr. Lewis is treating injuries in the Jenkins kitchen. Only then did Nora notice the angry red mark on Ethan's forearm where his sleeve had been rolled up. You're hurt, she said, concerned. It's nothing, he dismissed. But the good doctor will insist on treating it anyway. As they stood to follow Mrs. Henderson's instructions, Ethan placed his uninjured hand lightly on Nora's arm. 3 days, Nora. Before you decide anything, give me those 3 days. Too tired to argue, she simply nodded. 3 days. Nora spent most of the following day sleeping in the Hendersons' guest room, exhaustion claiming her completely. When she finally emerged, bathed and dressed in a borrowed dress from Mrs. Henderson's daughter, she found the town already mobilizing to help the Jenkins family rebuild. There you are, dear, Mrs. Henderson said cheerfully. Feeling more human again. Much better, thank you, Nora replied. Has there been any news about the fire? Contained completely, thank the Lord. The Jenkins lost their barn and about 40 acres, but they'll recover. This town takes care of its own. The phrase struck Nora. Its own. Was she one of Elko's own? She had lived there for 5 years, but had always kept 1 foot out the door, maintaining the distance befitting a schoolteacher while never fully integrating into the community. Mr. Henderson is organizing a barn raising for next week, the older woman continued, and the Ladies' Aid Society is collecting household goods to replace what was lost. I'd like to help, Nora said, while I'm still here at least. Mrs. Henderson studied her with shrewd eyes. And how long might that be? I'm not sure, Nora admitted. 3 days at least, because of Ethan Walker, Nora blushed. He asked for 3 days before I make any decisions. Smart man, Mrs. Henderson nodded approvingly, though it took him long enough to speak up. Men can be remarkably dense about matters of the heart. It's complicated, Nora said. Love always is, dear, but that doesn't make it any less worthwhile. Later that morning, Nora walked to the general store to purchase some basic necessities, her toiletries, and most of her personal items had been packed in her trunk, which was currently sitting unclaimed at the train station. The store owner, Mr. Peterson, greeted her with surprise. Miss Ellis. I thought you'd be halfway to Denver by now. Plans changed, she said simply. I'll need to retrieve my trunk from the station later. Already done, came a familiar voice from behind her. Turning, she found Ethan standing there, looking more rested though still sporting a bandage on his arm. Your trunk was delivered to the Hendersons' house an hour ago, he explained. Thank you, she said, genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness. How's your arm? Just a minor burn. Dr. Lewis says I'll live. His eyes crinkled with the smile that didn't quite reach his lips. I was wondering if you might join me for a ride this afternoon. There's something I'd like to show you. Nora hesitated only briefly. What time? 2 o'clock. I'll have horses ready at the livery. I'll be there. At the appointed time, Nora arrived at the livery stable wearing her most practical riding outfit, a divided skirt that had scandalized some of the more conservative townspeople when she'd first worn it 3 years ago. Ethan was already there, holding the reins of 2 saddled horses. You remembered Buttercup, Nora said, pleased to see the gentle Palomino mare she often rode on the rare occasions she ventured outside town. She remembers you too, Ethan replied, helping her mount. Been whinnying ever since I saddled her up. They rode out of town at an easy pace, heading west toward the foothills. The late October air was crisp but not uncomfortable, and the landscape showed the first hints of autumn colors among the predominant sage and scrub. Where are we going? Nora finally asked after they'd been riding in companionable silence for nearly half an hour. Patience, schoolteacher, Ethan teased. It's not much further. True to his word, they crested a small rise a few minutes later, and Nora gasped at the view. Below them stretched a small valley, sheltered by hills on three sides. A creek ran through it, bordered by cottonwood trees whose leaves had turned golden in the fall air. In the center stood a modest cabin, smoke rising lazily from its chimney. "What is this place?" she asked. "My home," Ethan answered simply, "or it will be once it's finished." He led her down the slope to the cabin. As they approached, Nora could see that it was larger than it had appeared from a distance, a proper house rather than a simple shelter. The main structure was complete, but additions were clearly in progress, with stacks of lumber and other building materials neatly organized nearby. "I bought this land 2 years ago," Ethan explained as they dismounted. "Been working on the house whenever I can spare time from the ranch." "It's beautiful," Nora said honestly. The setting was idyllic, peaceful in a way that the bustling town could never be, yet not so remote as to be isolated. Ethan tied their horses to a hitching post and led her to the porch. "Would you like to see inside?" The interior was simple but thoughtfully designed. A large main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace as its centerpiece. 2 doorways led to what Nora assumed were bedrooms, and large windows let in ample light. "It's not fancy," Ethan said, watching her reaction closely. "But it's solid. The roof doesn't leak and the chimney draws well. You built this yourself with some help from friends. The foundation stones came from the creek bed, the pine for the beams from those hills." He pointed through the window. "Every piece has a story." Nora ran her hand along the smooth surface of a wooden table. "Why show me this now?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Because this is the reason I'm asking you to stay. The cabin. No, Nora, the home it could be, our home." She stared at him, her heart suddenly pounding. "What are you saying, Ethan?" "I'm saying I love you," he stated plainly, the directness that was so characteristic of him shining through. "I've loved you since that first day when you were lost and too proud to admit it. I've loved you through misunderstandings and silences and wasted time." Nora felt dizzy with the confession. "Why didn't you say anything before now?" Pride at first, then fear of rejection, and honestly, I wasn't ready. He gestured to the cabin around them. "I wanted to have something to offer you, something worthy of you. You think I care about a house?" she asked. "No," he smiled slightly. "But I do. If I'm asking a Boston-educated lady to consider a life with a Nevada cowboy, I'd better have more than a bedroll to offer." "You're more than just a cowboy, Ethan. You're the foreman of the second-largest ranch in the county. You're respected by everyone who knows you." "And yet not quite respectable enough for Nora Ellis?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability breaking through his confident exterior. Nora stepped closer to him. "That's not fair. I never said or thought any such thing." "Then why have you been so determined to leave, to return to Boston?" "Because I thought there was nothing for me here," she exclaimed, her composure finally breaking. "I've spent 5 years building a life that seemed increasingly hollow. Teaching children who grow up and move on. Living alone in a town where I'm always Miss Ellis and never just Nora. Watching other women marry and build families while I remain the spinster schoolteacher." "You could have had more," Ethan said quietly. "You could have had me." "How was I to know that? You never said anything." "Neither did you." They stood facing each other, the accumulated tension of years hovering between them. "I'm saying something now," Ethan finally continued. "I'm asking you to stay in Nevada, to stay with me, to make this house a home and to build a life together." "Are you proposing?" Nora asked directly. "Yes," he replied without hesitation. "Inelegantly, perhaps, but sincerely, I love you, Nora Ellis. Will you marry me?" The words hung in the air between them. Nora's mind raced through all the practical objections: her father's illness, her sold house, her forfeited position. But beneath those concerns, a deeper truth emerged. She had been running away, not toward something better. "My father," she began. "We could visit him," Ethan suggested. "Or bring him here if his health permits travel. This house has room for family." "The school needs a teacher for the advanced students. Mrs. Peterson is qualified for the younger ones, but the town's been hoping to find someone for the older children. The school board would create the position in a heartbeat for you." Nora laughed despite herself. "You seem to have an answer for everything." "Not everything," Ethan admitted. "I don't know if you love me too. That's the one answer I need most." In that moment, with sunlight streaming through the windows of this house he had built with his own hands, Nora finally acknowledged the truth she had been avoiding for years. "I do," she said softly. "I have for a very long time." Ethan closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to cradle her face with remarkable gentleness for a man who worked with horses and cattle. "Say it again," he whispered. "I love you, Ethan Walker." His kiss was tentative at first, as if he couldn't quite believe this was happening. Then, as she responded, it deepened into something that made Nora understand why poets wrote about such moments. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "Is that a yes?" he asked, his forehead resting against hers. "Yes," Nora confirmed. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stay in Nevada. Yes to all of it." The smile that illuminated his face was unlike any expression she had seen from him before, pure joy without reservation. He lifted her off her feet in an exuberant embrace that made her laugh with delight. "When?" he asked as he set her down again. "How soon can I call you my wife?" "That depends," she replied, practical considerations returning. "There's much to arrange, letters to write. And we should do things properly." "Of course," Ethan agreed immediately. "Whatever you need, but I don't want to wait years, Nora. We've wasted too much time already." "Not years," she assured him. "Perhaps a month to notify my family and make arrangements." "A month," he repeated. "I can manage that." "Barely." They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the property together, with Ethan showing her the creek where trout were plentiful, the south-facing slope where he planned a vegetable garden, and the meadow where wildflowers bloomed in spring. "I want you to feel this is your home too," he explained. "If there are changes you'd like to make, additions you need, just say the word." "It's already perfect," Nora assured him, "though perhaps a small library someday." "Already planned," Ethan revealed, leading her back to the house and showing her a space adjacent to the main room. "This will be walled off next week, southern exposure for good reading light." As the afternoon waned, they reluctantly prepared to return to town. Before mounting their horses, Ethan pulled Nora into one more embrace. "I still can't believe you're staying," he murmured into her hair. "Believe it," she replied, feeling more certain of her decision with each passing hour. "Wild horses couldn't drag me onto that eastbound train now." The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Nora wrote to her family in Boston, explaining her change of plans and her engagement. She met with the school board, who were indeed eager to create a position for her teaching the older students. And most surprisingly, Mr. Richardson, who had purchased her house, offered to sell it back to her. "My wife and I have decided to move to California after all," he explained. "Her sister just had twins and she wants to be closer. I'd be happy to return your house for the same price I paid." Nora declined the offer. "Thank you, but I'll be living elsewhere after the wedding." Word of the engagement spread through Elko like wildfire. Mrs. Henderson immediately appointed herself wedding coordinator, while other townspeople offered congratulations and good-natured teasing. "About time you two figured it out," Sheriff Moore told Ethan one afternoon as they passed on the street. "The whole town's been waiting years for this announcement." Preparations for the wedding became a community affair. The Ladies' Aid Society organized a quilting bee to create a wedding quilt as a gift. The carpenter's wife offered to make a special cake. Even Nora's students, past and present, got involved, creating handmade decorations for the church. Through it all, Nora marveled at how differently she now viewed the town she had been so ready to leave. Where once she had seen limitations, she now recognized connections. The community she had thought she merely served, she now understood she was intrinsically part of. 2 weeks before the wedding, a letter arrived from Boston. Nora recognized her sister Eleanor's handwriting and opened it with trepidation, unsure how her family would react to her news. "What does it say?" Ethan asked, joining her on the Hendersons' porch where she had retreated to read in private. "My father's health has improved," Nora said, scanning the pages. "The new treatment is working better than expected, and—" she paused, surprised, "they're happy for me. Eleanor says she had always suspected I belonged in the West. She writes that she's never seen me as animated as I was in the letters I sent during my first years here." "Smart woman, your sister," Ethan commented. Nora continued reading. "They won't be able to attend the wedding on such short notice, but Eleanor suggests she and father might visit in the spring once the mountain passes are clear." "They'll be welcome," Ethan assured her. "All of your family will." The day before the wedding, Ethan took Nora back to their future home. The cabin had been transformed in the weeks since she had first seen it. The library was now enclosed with built-in bookshelves lining one wall. New curtains hung at the windows, a gift from Mrs. Henderson. And a handcrafted rocking chair sat near the fireplace. "The chair is from the ranch hands," Ethan explained. "They insisted on contributing something." Nora ran her hand along the smooth wood. "It's beautiful." "There's one more thing," Ethan said, leading her to what would be their bedroom. Inside, a magnificent bed frame dominated the space, the wood polished to a warm glow. The headboard featured an intricate carving of mountains and stars. "Ethan," Nora breathed. "Did you make this?" "Started it 2 years ago," he admitted. "Worked on it nights during the winter. Finished the carving last week. 2 years ago, but we weren't even. I was hopeful," he said simply. "Or maybe just foolishly optimistic." Nora traced the carved mountains with her fingertips. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever made for me." "There will be more," he promised. A lifetime more. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, a perfect late November day. The church was filled beyond capacity, with people standing in the back and children sitting cross-legged in the aisles. Nora wore a dress of pale blue silk that Mrs. Henderson had insisted on ordering from San Francisco. "White is traditional," the older woman had explained, "but blue brings happiness in a marriage, and it matches your eyes." As Nora walked down the aisle alone, no father to give her away in this Western ceremony, she felt none of the apprehension she had expected. Instead, a profound sense of rightness settled over her as she approached Ethan, who waited by the altar looking more handsome than she had ever seen him in his new suit. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. They exchanged traditional vows, their voices clear and confident in the hushed church. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the congregation was deafening. The celebration afterwards spilled out from the church hall into the street. Tables laden with food lined the thoroughfare, and a band played lively tunes for dancing. As the new Mrs. Walker, Nora found herself passed from one dance partner to another as townspeople claimed their turn with the bride. Having second thoughts yet. Ethan asked when he finally reclaimed her for a dance as the evening waned. "Not a single one," Nora assured him, "though I am ready to go home." His eyes darkened at her words. "So am I." They slipped away as discreetly as possible, though good-natured calls and whistles followed them as they mounted their horses for the ride to their cabin. The full moon provided ample light for the journey, and they rode in companionable silence, both wrapped in thoughts of the future that stretched before them. At the cabin, Ethan insisted on carrying Nora across the threshold. "For luck," he explained, lifting her easily into his arms. I thought that was just for new houses, she teased. It's new to us, he replied. Our first night here together. The interior was warm and welcoming, the fire having been lit earlier by one of Ethan's ranch hands. Candles cast a soft glow throughout the main room, and a bottle of wine waited on the table. Later, as they lay together in the magnificent bed he had crafted, Nora marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. I was so certain I was leaving, she murmured against his shoulder. So determined to return east. Ethan's hand traced lazy patterns on her bare skin. What changed your mind? Truly, she considered the question carefully. I think I was always looking for belonging, she finally said. In Boston, I was just someone's daughter, someone's sister. I came west seeking independence, but I found myself becoming just the schoolteacher instead. I never felt fully seen until you. I've always seen you, Nora, he said softly. From that very first day, I know that now, and I see you too, Ethan Walker. Not just the capable cowboy everyone respects, but the man who carves mountains and stars into a headboard and waits years for the woman he loves. His arms tightened around her. I would have waited forever. Thank goodness that wasn't necessary, Nora laughed softly. We have much better things to do with our time. The years that followed proved Nora right. Their life together unfolded with a richness neither had fully anticipated. The school thrived under the arrangement of two teachers, with Nora taking the older students while Mrs. Peterson taught the younger ones. The cabin expanded gradually to include a proper dining room, a larger kitchen, and eventually, a nursery. Their first child, a son they named James, arrived exactly 9 months after their wedding, causing good-natured teasing from the townspeople about their honeymoon baby. 2 years later, their daughter Catherine joined the family. Both children inherited their father's love of the outdoors and their mother's passion for learning. Nora's father and sister did visit the following spring, staying for nearly a month. To everyone's surprise, Alina fell in love with Nevada and with Sheriff Moore, whom she eventually married after a whirlwind courtship, giving the Ellis sisters a permanent connection. The Jenkins family rebuilt their barn with the help of the entire community, and their farm recovered fully within 2 years. Martha Jenkins grew into a promising young woman who became Nora's assistant at the school, with plans to become a teacher herself. As for Ethan and Nora, they found in each other exactly what they had both been seeking. He gave her the sense of belonging she had always craved, while she brought warmth and purpose to the home he had built. Together, they created a life that neither could have imagined separately. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they sat together on the porch of their now expanded home, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Their children played in the yard with the family dog, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Do you ever regret it? Ethan asked, his hand finding hers as it had countless times over the years. Not taking that train, not returning to Boston, Nora squeezed his fingers, her wedding ring catching the last rays of sunlight. Never, she said with absolute certainty. Not for a single moment. Even when winter comes and the wind howls through these hills, he teased. Even when spring brings mud so thick it sucks the boots right off your feet, even when summer's heat makes you long for your cool Boston home, even then, she assured him. Especially then. Because that's when I'm most grateful for this life we've built. For our home, our family, for you, Ethan. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm with the same tenderness he had shown on their first night together. I promised you a lifetime, he reminded her. And I intend to keep that promise. I'm counting on it, Cowboy, Nora replied, leaning against his shoulder as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. I'm counting on it. As night fell completely, they remained on the porch, wrapped in shared memories and dreams still to come. The woman who had once been so determined to leave the West forever now couldn't imagine being anywhere else. In finding Ethan, she had found her true home not in a place, but in a person. In the family they had created together. In the community that had become such an integral part of their lives. And though the eastbound train continued to pass through Elko 3 times a week, Nora Ellis Walker never once considered boarding it. Her journey had led her exactly where she was meant to be all along.